Welcome to Signed, Conversations with Digital Mavericks. I'm your host, Anita Sharma. Please like, follow, and subscribe to @Signed the podcast. And as you are listening now, you can listen anywhere you get your podcasts. I am incredibly excited about today's guest. Today we have Nadya Okamoto on the show. She is a content creator, entrepreneur, author, and advocate. Nadya started her career at the very tender age of 16 years old. She founded the nonprofit organization called Period.org to fight period poverty and stigma. She has since published a book called Period Power and started a game-changing period brand called August. Nadya is a staunch advocate for menstrual equity and mental health. She has been recognized on the lists of Forbes 30 Under 30, Bloomberg 50 Ones to Watch, People Magazine's Women Changing the World, and Women's Wear Daily, 30 most impactful women under 30 across beauty and wellness. Today, we're going to have a conversation about influence, longevity, and using your voice intentionally. Welcome to the show, Nadya. Signed, Conversations with Digital Mavericks.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so, you and I have known each other for a few years. I'll always remember our first meeting at your office in Times Square just after I had my daughter. So I will always remember that meeting because I think that was like a month or a couple months at least anyways, after I had her, and you and I met and have worked together over the years. And, but I've been following you ever since. And I feel like at the risk of sounding condescending, I feel like I've watched you grow up because you've done so much incredible work since then, since 2018. So yeah, I would love to go back to start with going back to your early days as a teenage activist. So how did you get started and what motivated you?
Yeah, so I originally started in high school, really just became passionate about period poverty as an issue, had learned about the people who experienced period poverty in my own community using things like toilet paper, socks, brown paper, grocery bags, cardboard to take care of their periods. And it was just something I had never thought of before. And I think for me at 16, it was just a big privilege check wake up call, right? Of no matter what I was going through, I had never thought of not having access to period products. And there's something about the issue that I think just is so personal to me as a menstruator, as someone who comes from a household of girls, that I just haven't been able to stop thinking about it for the last 12 years. And the more I researched about the issue, the more I tried to find volunteering opportunities, it just felt like there was a gap there, right? I think that was kind of my original response. You're a high schooler, you're like, okay, here's an issue I care about. Let me go find an organization to volunteer for or do an event for. And there was just nothing in my area. And so originally I started with what I thought was just the most obvious thing to do was let me just copy what people are doing with food drives in school, and we'll just do period product drives and then donate them to where they need to go. And then it kind of, with social media, became this thing that we were then working with other schools to replicate in their areas. And that's kind of the origin of the chapter network. And so I led that nonprofit for 6 years as executive director, really focused on the distribution of period products, taking down the period stigma, and working on legislative advocacy for things like taking down the tampon tax, period products in schools, shelters, and prisons. And I think that, my career looks very different now than it did a decade ago, but I think my mission, sort of my North Star, has very much remained the same.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I feel like clearly from such a young age, you cared about these issues, but you also have such a strong voice, and you haven't stopped advocating and using your influence. And I feel like everything you do is so purpose-driven. And so, you start this nonprofit organization, you go to Harvard, which is incredibly impressive, which I think you were there during COVID.
Yes, I was there. So I started Harvard in 2016. I took a gap year before my junior year, but basically my last year and a half were completely remote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you graduate from Harvard, and it sounds like you started to use social media fairly early on, like when you were working with your nonprofit. And I have to remind myself, you're still young. So back then, when you were in high school, social media was a thing. And so you were using it to, reach people and to set up these drives, et cetera. And so you graduate from Harvard, and so you're now like also an entrepreneur, because we should talk about your company, August, which manufactures period products, and that seems to be going incredibly well. I can't, women know obviously so much about menstruation since we experience it, but you've actually made it cool, like your product and your packaging, like it's so interesting to me. And so what brought you there to that entrepreneurial endeavor?
Yeah, so I started working on what is now August, my junior year of college. And basically for like a few years in college, I was working on another company called Juve Consulting, which was sort of one of the first Gen Z marketing focused, like consumer insights focused marketing consultancies that actually my now co-founder again had started when he was 16. And so I would say that through working there, where a lot of the major period care brands were clients of mine, and we were kind of trying to push for a change from within the industry, to then working in the activist, influencer, nonprofit angle of changing culture around periods, I would say that I just kind of kept feeling frustrated in all of those areas, just feeling like I know what I want to create, right? I want to push for sort of a social enterprise that generates revenue that can fund impact, but also like change culture through a brand, right? And I tried to do that for a long time in the nonprofit field, but when you're in that model of work, you're also heavily reliant on the existing companies for funding. So there's kind of less freedom to, for all intents and purposes, to give the middle finger to the existing industry and say, like, we're going to push for change. And so I would say that, I kind of denied the urge for years to start my own brand, because I felt very unqualified and was like, let me try to change the industry from all other angles I possibly can.
It's an industry that's been around forever. I mean, it's like Tampax. That's all
for like
anyone
100
knows.
years.
Yeah.
And so I would say that it really was getting to a point, like my co-founder and I both sort of seeing this opportunity and also feeling this bubbling over level of frustration of like, we feel like we know what the answer is, right? We want to change culture around periods. We live in a consumerist culture. There's an opportunity to make better, more sustainable products. Like, we can kind of check all those boxes. And then also, I think getting to a point of confidence of feeling like, I think we're the right people to do this, right? Like, we want to make a Gen Z brand. We are Gen Z leaders. Like, I have this sort of subject matter expertise that I've built for like the last 8 years at that point, in periods specifically. And yeah, to your point, like I've used social media from day one of all of my organizing work, but it was never considered like a content creation career, right? From the beginning, it was like, I need volunteers. I used Facebook events to engage volunteers. Like, I literally used it as basically just like a landing page for whatever volunteer events we had. And so I think from an early part of my career, social media, mainly Facebook at the time, was used for me as a tool for gaining volunteers, organizing volunteers and donations, right? And so it was a fundraising tool. And then kind of like 3-4 years into working on the nonprofit, I started learning that like a lot of the sponsors were interested in, quote, visibility for like their donation, right? So it was, we'll give you, let's say 50,000 tampons in exchange for one social post. And I think those kind of conversations is what introduced me to like, oh, there's like currency in social posts, right? And so that's kind of, by the time I had left leading that nonprofit, a lot of our funding was coming from, what was basically influencer deals, but I was just funneling whatever money I made into the organization as much as possible, right? And so I think that's kind of what taught me like, oh, this is like a whole other career. Like, this is capital currency, like, to have this platform. And I sort of followed that into, okay, now I'm starting a direct-to-consumer brand. We need to raise brand awareness. How do you get the word out there in a digital world, especially at the height of the pandemic? Everything is so online. And TikTok was the newest app that everybody was on. And so it was kind of like a no-brainer, to go in that direction.
Yeah. I feel like you'll probably be back at Harvard in no time if you haven't already, just presenting a case study on this. I feel like your timing was impeccable, right? Because you launched this period products company, it's social enterprise, at a time when social media was just like really taking off. And like you said, TikTok had come along. People were like online during the pandemic. But it's easy to sort of say like, oh, okay, well, we see this opportunity, but you actually executed on it. And what I find particularly interesting about you is your content. How do you manage to combine purpose-driven content with your personal life in such an effective way? Like, what was the first post that you made where you were like, okay, this is how I can do this? Because Nadya Okamoto is a brand as well, right? But you're so like integrated into obviously the brand of the company you founded. I'm talking specifically about post where you go to music festivals and you're like the period fairy, and it's still so much yourself and you're in this like really fun environment, but you're promoting the brand. So I know there's a lot of questions in there. I guess the first question being, how did you figure out how to make it work on social media?
I mean, I think that sometimes I still don't really know if I know how it works because it's constant.
I mean, you have 6 million followers now across
but
all
I think that I think I approach social as like it's always changing, right? Like I've been in the world of sort of entrepreneurship / social media for over 10 years. And like, as I said, like I was using Facebook 10 years ago and now like I don't use it at all, right? Like TikTok isn't what it was 5 years ago. I mean, as of this week, it's under completely new
Exactly.
We don't even know what the future of the app is going to be. So I feel very like humbled every single day. And so I think that the way that I approach social even today is like in a very experimental way where I acknowledge that I have no control over how these platforms work and the algorithms are always changing and they're not made, for my happiness. So it's like always experimenting. I think also at the same time, like from the beginning of starting August, like we knew that this company would be limited if I was like equated to be the only face of August, right? And so I always sort of thought of how do you make August really representative of larger community? And like I can be the biggest public cheerleader, but like it isn't Nadya equals August, right? Like I think kind of an extreme example of that is like Paris Hilton has a ton of brands and every single one of those brands is like literally Paris. Like it's just Paris Hilton, Paris Hilton's face, Paris Hilton's name. Like I do not want to be that. Like I love when I meet people who are like, wait, you founded August? I thought you were just like an influencer for them, right? Like that, I love those compliments because that's what I want it to be, right? I want August to stand on its own and I want to be like the biggest champion of August. I want to be the biggest fan and I want to be like a top of funnel for people to discover the brand, right? But I don't want you to learn about me through August. Like I want it to be like its own standalone brand that such a diverse community of young people can see themselves represented in. And so a lot, again, like I think for me, August at the same time is like my baby. That's like what I care about. That is like my end all be all. That is where my heart is, like what I want my legacy to be, meaning that I carry August with me into everywhere I go. So like if I go to a music festival, I'm carrying August. And I'm like, if I'm on my period, like to what you're saying, I haven't done this for a few years, but basically like it was very organic. I went to Electric Forest. I was in my music rave era and I just happened to get my period. And so I just like wore my pad loud and proud and posted all about it. And like, sometimes I think it's one of those things where I'm so almost like extreme stigma free that like I forget until I see the reaction of other people, like how stigmatized periods still are, right? Like that blew up and got millions and millions of impressions like overnight. And I think a lot of it was just like people hadn't at the time like seen someone wearing a pad in public. And that's, again, not what I'm advocating for. I'm not advocating for everyone to go walk outside in their pad. For me, it was like what I was doing. And it became such a statement piece online. But I think that, to be honest, it was very accidental and very experimental. And I leaned into it for as long as it kind of worked.
Yeah. I mean, your voice, like you pointing out, like you're so stigma free. I mean, that's part of what is so like helpful with you in getting your message across, right? Because you're talking about it totally normally. I mean, you're interviewing Gretchen Whitmer about when she got her period. I mean, that was like amazing, and you don't have any fear of doing that. And I think young women definitely connect with you. I'm sure, as much as I don't like to talk about this part of the business, but I'm sure you also get a lot of hate from the misogynists out there who are like, who do you think you are? Nobody wants to see that. And how do you deal with that part of, because what you do online is a lot of people are shocked by, right? And how do you deal with that?
I mean, I think that I just find it very motivating. I think from the beginning of my career, I always thought of activism, like by definition, as being something where you're pushing against the status quo, meaning that like if I didn't get any pushback, then I could retire. Like, wouldn't that be great if like the work was done? Like it's all destigmatized. Like I think that I believe so strongly in the need to destigmatize periods and what we're doing that for me, pushback is just like a sign that we have so much more work to do, right? And so I think, and a lot of my original viral content was actually responding to a lot of hate comments, right? Someone saying, that's disgusting. And then me saying, I just want to call in the fact, like I would make a video replying like, I see that you're also assigned female at birth, like you probably also get a period. And like, is that like, how sad is it that you have that internalized shame for this thing that's so natural about your body? And like, what does that shame teach you and the people around you that like you hide your tampon up your sleeve? And so I think for me, like obviously there's internet hate that can get very personal, right? But like when it comes to backlash around periods, it's something that like for me, I'm so mission driven in that like actually all the backlash I just find very motivating. And if anything, like affirming that like there's a need for what I'm doing, right? Like I know a lot of other activists sort of in my past life of working very much in politics, like when you believe in what you're doing, there's no, you might have the imposter syndrome of like, am I the right person to do it? But there's no imposter syndrome around like, oh, what I'm doing doesn't matter. Like I feel so strongly that this issue is like so prevalent and very much here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I'm glad that you don't let it get to you and that it serves as a motivator, and that's great. And that, you continue to do this incredibly important work that you do. And you also are a big advocate for mental health. And so you talk very openly about your own struggles. And I think that's so much of what makes you authentic and what makes young people probably really connect with you, right? I mean, people of all ages, but I think probably in particular Gen Z, because you're one of them and you're, a voice similar to theirs. And so is that also, do you approach that the same way where you're like, I just want this to be stigma free, and so I'm going to talk openly about myself? Because it's quite, it's putting yourself in a really vulnerable position. And I wonder like how you decided to sort of speak out more about that.
I mean, actually, I think very similarly, like I don't think there was a moment where I was like, you know what I want to be? Like, I want to be a mental health advocate, right? It was more like, I have a very, like, there's not a lot of boundaries, and for better or for worse, I don't have a lot of boundary between this is who I am online and this is who I am, like, offline, right? Like, I think I just am one way. Like, I think that I'm just the same person.
Yeah, I can attest to that because I agree with that 100%.
And so I think that it's more like, because I struggle with my mental health and I'm talking about like basically everything I struggle with online, like me talking about what I'm going through online in no way is like me talking about what I'm going through online is not me trying to be like a mental health advocate. It's just like I happen to be going through it, but like because of how stigmatized mental health is, like it talking about it inherently makes people think that like I'm an advocate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, when you're really just saying like you're talking about your everyday experience and this is what I'm going through right now because you're sharing your life online. That wraps up part 1 of my conversation with the incredible Nadya Okamoto. But we're just getting started. In part 2, Nadya fills us in on reconnecting with her sisters, her thoughts on the new US-owned version of TikTok, and she gives invaluable advice to young creators and first-time entrepreneurs. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Part 2 is coming up next week. We post on Thursdays, everywhere you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed this conversation, please make sure to like, follow, and subscribe on socials and wherever you're listening. And if you know someone who'd enjoy this episode, send it their way. Thanks for listening.